The job was supposed to be a simple, in and out, architectural shoot, the kind that paid my rent for 3 months in a single evening. But from the moment the heavy steel gates of the Vance estate clicked shut behind my Volvo, I felt like prey walking into a trap. The house didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress disguised as a modern art museum, a suspended cube of glass and steel jutting out over the cliffside, isolated from the rest of Los Angeles by a winding, treacherous canyon road. The storm that had been threatening the coast all afternoon finally broke as I unloaded my camera gear, the sky turning a bruised, violent purple. I was 23, hungry for the paycheck, and naive enough to think that the only danger here was messing up the lighting exposure. I was wrong. Waiting for me at the massive pivot front door wasn't the owner, but Elena, the realtor who had hired me. She was 34, sharper than the jagged rocks below the cliff, and dressed in a tailored crimson suit that cost more than my entire education. She didn't greet me. She just checked her watch, her eyes scanning me with a mix of appraisal and dissatisfaction, as if I were a piece of furniture that clashed with the decor. "You're late, Alex," she lied, her voice smooth and cold. "We have exactly 40 minutes before the automated security lockdown seals the perimeter. Do not waste my time." The atmosphere inside the glass cube was suffocatingly sterile. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt like a meat locker, and the silence was so absolute it made the ringing in my ears deafening. Elena shadowed my every move. She wasn't just supervising, she was hunting. Every time I set up a tripod or adjusted a lens, she was there, stepping into my personal space, her perfume, something expensive and spicy, overwhelming my senses. She didn't act like a realtor trying to sell a house. She acted like a woman looking for leverage. As the thunder rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, frantic shadows across the marble floors, the tension shifted from professional annoyance to something far more volatile. I was photographing the living room when she walked right in front of my lens, blocking the shot. She didn't move. She just stared at me, her gaze dropping to my hands, then up to my eyes. "You're trembling," she observed, stepping closer until I had to lean back against the cold glass wall. She reached out, her fingers cool and deliberate, and straightened the collar of my shirt. Her knuckles grazed the skin of my neck, lingering there for a heartbeat too long. It wasn't a motherly gesture, it was a claim of ownership. "You're intimidated," she whispered, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Good. Fear makes you pay attention to detail. Now forget the living room. The money shot is upstairs. The master suite." We took the floating staircase to the second floor, the storm raging harder outside, turning the glass walls into sheets of gray water. The master suite was cavernous, dominated by a bed that looked like it had never been slept in. I started to set up my lights, desperate to put the camera between us again, but Elena cut the power to the overhead track lighting. "No artificial light," she commanded, her voice dropping an octave. "We use the storm. It's dramatic. It sells." She walked past me, brushing her hip against my arm, a contact so firm and intentional it sent a jolt of electricity straight to my spine. She wasn't looking at the view. She was walking toward the far wall, where a seamless panel hid the entrance to the master closet. "Have you ever seen a safe room, Alex?" she asked, her back to me. "Because in a house like this, the closet isn't for clothes. It's for secrets." She pushed the panel, and it swung open on silent, heavy hinges. It wasn't a closet. It was a vault, lined with cedar and velvet, windowless and pitch black. I hesitated at the threshold. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to grab my gear and sprint for the car, but Elena turned around in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the darkness behind her. She reached out, grabbed the lapel of my jacket, and yanked me forward with surprising strength. I stumbled into the dark space with her, the smell of cedar instantly enveloping us. "I need a favor," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made the hair on my arm stand up. "This room is the selling point. It's reinforced steel, independent oxygen, biometric locks." She stepped in closer, forcing me to back up until I hit the velvet-lined shelving. We were inches apart in the gloom, the only light spilling in from the bedroom doorway. "But the client is obsessed with privacy. He needs to know that if he screams in here, no one hears him." She placed a hand flat on the center of my chest, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. Her eyes locked onto mine, dark and unreadable. "I need a partner for this, Alex. Close the door. Test the soundproofing with me." The suggestion hung in the air, heavy with a double meaning that was impossible to ignore. The air in the closet felt charged, thick with an intimacy that was terrifyingly aggressive. I reached for the handle, my hand shaking, mesmerized by the sheer force of her presence. But just as my fingers touched the cold steel of the inner latch, the situation shattered. Below us, in the main atrium, the heavy, distinct sound of the front door's electronic lock disengaging echoed up the stairwell. It was a mechanical thud that shouldn't have been possible without a key card. Elena froze, her hand tightening painfully on my chest. Her arrogance vanished instantly, replaced by a sharp, feral alertness. "That's not security," she hissed, her face pale. "That's Vance. The owner. He's in Hong Kong. He's supposed to be in Hong Kong." Heavy footsteps, 2 sets, maybe 3, began to click rapidly across the marble floor downstairs. Men's voices, low and urgent, drifted up. "He can't find us," Elena whispered, the seduction gone, replaced by raw, frantic survival. "If he finds us, you're not a photographer anymore, you're a loose end." She didn't wait for me to react. She grabbed the heavy steel door of the closet and pulled it shut. The latch clicked, sealing us inside the pitch-black vault. The sound of the storm, the footsteps, the world outside, everything vanished, replaced by the deafening silence of the soundproof room and the ragged sound of our own breathing. We were locked in, trapped in the dark with a woman who had lured me into a cage, while a dangerous man walked the halls just a few feet away. I reached for my phone to use the light, but Elena's hand slapped over mine in the dark, her grip crushing. "Don't you dare," she breathed directly into my ear. "There's a vent gap at the bottom. If you use a light, they'll see it. Stay still." The darkness inside the vault was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that erased the physical world and left only the terrifying proximity of our bodies. The moment the latch clicked shut, the silence became a physical weight, pressing against my eardrums. We were sealed in a box of cedar and steel, isolated from the storm and the intruders outside, but trapped in an intimate cage of our own making. Elena didn't move away. In the cramped space, there was nowhere to go. She was pressed against me, her back to the door, her front molded to mine in a forced embrace necessitated by the narrow shelving. I could feel the rapid, frantic rise and fall of her chest against mine, the heat of her body radiating through the expensive fabric of her suit. The air was already growing warm, thick with the scent of her spicy perfume and the sharp, metallic tang of our shared adrenaline. Her hand was still clamped over my mouth, her fingers digging into my cheek, trembling slightly. We stood frozen, a single, terrified organism in the dark, waiting for a vibration, a sound, anything that would tell us if the men outside had heard the door close. For a long, agonizing minute, there was nothing but the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears, and the ragged, shallow breaths Elena was trying to control. Then, the handle of the closet door rattled, a sharp, metallic clack that vibrated through the steel and straight into our spines. Elena stiffened, her grip on me tightening until it was painful. Someone was right there, inches away on the other side of the barrier. We held our breath, the tension in the tiny room spiking to a level that felt explosive. A muffled voice, deep and angry, vibrated through the doorframe. It was Vance. He was trying to get in. Elena slowly removed her hand from my mouth, but she didn't step back. Instead, she reached up in the pitch blackness, her hands finding my face, her thumbs tracing my jawline to keep my head turned toward her. She leaned up, standing on her toes, her lips brushing against my ear. "He can't open it," she breathed, her voice a ghost of a whisper that sent shivers down my neck. "I changed the biometric code this morning. He thinks it's a malfunction, but he won't stop. We have 5 minutes before he goes to the security hub in the basement to override the system." In the darkness, the dynamic shifted. The aggressive dominance she had shown earlier dissolved into a desperate, conspiratorial intimacy. She took my hand and guided it to the pocket of her jacket, forcing my fingers to close around a small, cold, rectangular object. It wasn't a weapon. It was a heavy, metallic USB drive. "This is why we're here, Alex," she whispered, the secret spilling out in the dark. "I didn't bring you here to take photos. I needed a witness, someone unconnected. Vance isn't just a client. He's my ex-husband. He stole everything from me, my company, my reputation, my life. This drive contains the encrypted ledgers of his offshore accounts. It's the only leverage I have to get my life back." The revelation hit me hard. I wasn't just a photographer anymore. I was an accessory to corporate espionage, holding the smoking gun in a dark closet while the target stood just outside. The USB drive, cold and hard in my palm, became the physical symbol of the dangerous pact we had just formed. It wasn't about real estate, it was about revenge. The air in the closet was getting hotter, the oxygen thinning. Elena's anxiety was beginning to crack her composure. She slumped slightly against me, her forehead resting on my shoulder, her breathing hitching. "If he finds us," she murmured into my neck, her voice trembling, "he won't call the police. He has private security. They fix problems. We are a problem." The reality of the threat forced us closer. My arms instinctively went around her waist to steady her, pulling her flush against me. In the dark, the boundaries of propriety vanished completely. I could feel the curve of her spine, the softness of her hair against my cheek. She lifted her head, and even though I couldn't see her, I could feel her gaze burning into mine. She ran her hands down my chest, gripping my shirt, anchoring herself to me. "You have to help me," she whispered, her voice shifting from fear to a seductive, desperate command. "You're the only one I can trust now. Don't make me beg." For a moment, the danger outside ceased to exist. There was only the heat of the closet and the woman in my arms. The adrenaline was acting like an aphrodisiac, blurring the lines between fear and attraction. She leaned in, her face searching for mine in the dark, her breath hot on my lips. We were on the precipice, the sheer intensity of the situation pushing us toward a reckless, physical release of tension. My heart hammered against her chest, and I felt her responding, her body softening against mine, her lips parting. It was a moment of absolute, suspended reality where we almost crossed the line into something irrevocable. But then, a heavy, rhythmic thudding began against the door. Vance was kicking it, shouting something muffled and furious. The violence of the sound shattered the intimate bubble. Elena gasped, pulling back sharply, the spell broken by the brute force of reality. "He's going to break the mechanism," she hissed, the steel returning to her voice. She grabbed my wrist, squeezing hard. "We have to move. Now! While he goes to get the crowbar from the garage." She pushed a set of heavy car keys into my hand, pressing my fingers over them along with the USB drive. "Listen to me closely. The balcony door in the bedroom is unlocked. We go out the window, down the trellis to the garden. My car is a silver Porsche parked on the access road, past the gates. You take the drive. You take the car." She paused, her hand lingering on my chest one last time. "If we get separated, don't wait for me. Go to the Griffith Observatory parking lot. The north side, looking over the city. Wait for me there at midnight. If I'm not there by 12:15, throw the drive into the canyon and run." We burst out of the closet and into the master bedroom, like divers gasping for air, the adrenaline hitting us with the force of a physical blow. The room was empty, illuminated only by the violent strobe light flashes of lightning tearing through the glass walls. Vance's angry shouting had faded toward the garage, giving us a terrifyingly narrow window of opportunity. Elena didn't hesitate. She kicked off her expensive heels, grabbing my hand with a grip that felt desperate and cold. We sprinted across the plush carpet to the balcony doors. The moment we slid the glass panel open, the storm roared into the room, a chaotic wall of wind and freezing rain that instantly soaked us to the bone. The perfectly curated silence of the house was replaced by the deafening fury of nature. We stepped out onto the slick marble balcony, the wind whipping Elena's hair across her face, blinding her. We were 2 stories up, suspended over a dark, manicured garden that was rapidly turning into a mudslide. There were no stairs. The only way down was a decorative iron trellis covered in thick, thorny vines that clung to the side of the house like a dark vein. "Go first," Elena shouted over the thunder, her voice cracking. "Test the weight." I swung my legs over the railing, the metal slick and freezing under my hands. The descent was a nightmare. The vines tore at my clothes and skin, the thorns finding purchase through my jacket. I dropped the last few feet into the soft, muddy earth of a flower bed and looked up. Elena was struggling. Without her shoes, she was slipping on the wet metal, panic making her movements erratic. Halfway down, her foot slipped. She gasped, swinging wildly, holding on by a single hand. I didn't think. I surged forward, catching her as she fell the last 6 feet. We collapsed together into the mud, a tangle of limbs and heavy breathing. The impact knocked the wind out of her, and for a second, she just lay there on top of me, shivering violently, her face buried in my chest. The arrogant, untouchable realtor was gone. In her place was a terrified woman clinging to me as her only lifeline. I held her tight, shielding her from the rain, feeling a fierce, protective instinct rise up in me that had nothing to do with the money or the job. We scrambled to our feet, hunching low to stay below the sight line of the ground floor windows. The garden was a labyrinth of sculpted hedges and topiaries, now sinister shapes in the dark. We moved quickly, heading toward the perimeter wall where the access road lay. Suddenly, a beam of harsh white light swept across the lawn, cutting through the rain just inches from where we stood. We threw ourselves behind a thick hedge, pressing our bodies into the wet leaves. "Security," Elena hissed, her lips right against my ear. "They're sweeping the grounds." We could hear the squelch of heavy boots in the mud and the static burst of radios. They were close, dangerously close. The perimeter wasn't just locked, it was actively patrolled. We were pinned down, trapped between the house and the wall, with armed guards closing the net. In the dark shelter of the hedge, with the rain hammering down around us, the dynamic between us shifted irrevocably. Elena turned to face me, wiping water and mud from her eyes. She looked wrecked, her makeup smeared, her expensive suit ruined, but her eyes were burning with a raw, unguarded intensity. She reached out, her freezing hands cupping my face, pulling me close so our foreheads touched. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the confession tearing out of her. "I dragged you into this because I thought you were just a kid I could use. A disposable witness. I was wrong." It wasn't just an apology. It was an admission of guilt and a recognition of my agency. She ran her thumb over my cheekbone, her gaze dropping to my lips for a fleeting second before locking back onto my eyes. "You didn't run. You caught me." The distance between us evaporated. In the mud and the rain, with the threat of capture looming, the physical barrier broke. It wasn't a seduction this time. It was a desperate, human connection forged in the fires of survival. The moment was shattered by the crackle of a radio just on the other side of the hedge. "Sector 4 clear. Checking the east gate." The guard was moving away, but heading directly toward the spot where Elena's car was parked outside the wall. We had to move now. Elena tried to stand, but her leg buckled. She stifled a cry of pain, clutching her ankle. "It's twisted," she groaned, panic flooding her voice. "I can't run, Alex. I can't make it to the car before they spot us." I looked at the wall, then back at her. I had the keys. I had the drive. I could leave her here, make a break for it, and save myself. It was the logical choice. But looking at her, broken and fierce in the mud, I knew I couldn't do it. "I'm not leaving you," I said, grabbing her arm and hauling her up, supporting her weight. "We go together." She shook her head, pushing me back. "No. Listen to me." She grabbed the front of my shirt, pulling me down. "You have the drive. That's the only thing that matters. If they catch me, I'm just a trespassing ex-wife. If they catch you with that drive, you disappear." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, silver remote, the gate opener. She pressed it into my hand, closing my fingers over it tight. The symbol of the USB drive and the keys had changed. They were no longer stolen goods. They were a trust, her life, her future, placed entirely in my hands. "Take the car. Go to the observatory. I'll create a diversion. I'll trigger the perimeter alarm on the west side. It'll draw them away." "Elena, no. Go," she shouted over the thunder, pushing me hard toward the wall. "Save the drive, Alex. Save me." Before I could stop her, she picked up a heavy garden stone and hurled it through the glass of the nearby greenhouse. The sound of shattering glass was explosive. Immediately, shouting erupted from the guards. "Contact! West side! Go, go, go!" Flashlights swung away from the gate, converging on Elena's position. She looked at me one last time, her silhouette framed by the rain, and mouthed a single word, "Run." Then she turned and limped into the light, drawing the fire. I scrambled over the wall, my heart tearing in two, and landed on the asphalt of the access road. The silver Porsche was there, gleaming in the rain. I fumbled with the keys, my hand shaking violently, and threw myself into the driver's seat. As the engine roared to life, I looked back at the house. Flashing lights were swarming the garden. I had the ticket to the next part of this nightmare, the car, the evidence, and the meeting point, but I was leaving her behind in the storm, alone. I slammed my foot on the gas, the tires screeching as I tore down the canyon road, the rearview mirror filled with darkness and guilt. The drive to the Griffith Observatory was a blur of rain-slicked asphalt and blinding neon, a surreal nightmare viewed through the windshield of a $300,000 stolen car. I drove with a mechanical, terrifying focus, my hands gripping the leather steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The storm had washed Los Angeles clean, leaving the city below shimmering like a vast, electric ocean, indifferent to the fact that I was currently committing grand theft auto and harboring stolen corporate secrets. The adrenaline that had fueled my escape from the estate was beginning to curdle into a cold, heavy dread. I parked the silver Porsche in the shadows of the deserted north lot, cutting the engine. The silence that rushed back in was deafening. It was 11:45 p.m. I was alone on top of the world, with nothing but a USB drive in my pocket and the ghost of a woman I might have left for dead. The consequences of my choice began to vibrate in my pocket. My phone lit up, a call from my mother. It was followed immediately by a text from my landlord about the rent check. Seeing those mundane, normal names flash across the screen felt like looking at a life that belonged to a stranger. I realized then that I couldn't go back. If Vance's security team tracked my digital footprint, they wouldn't just find me. They would find my family, my friends, everyone I loved. I sat there in the dark, looking at the glowing screen, and made the first true sacrifice of the night. I didn't answer. I didn't text back to say I was safe. Instead, I rolled down the window, the cold mountain air biting my face, and ejected the SIM card. I snapped it in half, then smashed the phone itself against the center console until the screen shattered into a spiderweb of black glass. I tossed the pieces into the brush at the edge of the cliff. I had effectively erased Alex the photographer, leaving only the accomplice in the dark. Midnight came and went. The silence stretched into an agonizing 15 minutes. I paced the edge of the parking lot, the USB drive burning a hole in my hand, ready to throw it into the canyon as Elena had ordered. Then, a pair of headlights swept across the damp pavement, not a security convoy, but a yellow taxi. It slowed, stopped, and the back door opened. Elena stumbled out. She looked devastatingly broken. Her crimson suit was torn and stained with mud, her hair matted with rain, and she was favoring her left leg heavily. But she was alive. I ran to her, catching her before she could collapse, and the relief that crashed through me was so intense it nearly brought me to my knees. We didn't speak. We just clung to each other in the dark, deserted parking lot, two survivors of a shipwreck finding solid ground. I pulled her into the passenger seat of the Porsche, wrapping my jacket around her shivering frame. "He let me go," she whispered, her voice a jagged shard of glass. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring out at the city grid below. "I triggered the alarm, and they caught me near the greenhouse. Vance," he laughed. "He searched me, found nothing, and told his men to throw me out the front gate." She turned to me, her eyes hollow and dark. "He thinks I failed. He thinks I was just a desperate ex-wife trying to break in for jewelry or spite. He doesn't know you exist, Alex. He doesn't know about the drive." In the quiet safety of the car, the armor finally fell away completely. She curled into the seat, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "It wasn't just about the money," she confessed, the words spilling out in a rush of vulnerability. "Vance didn't just divorce me, he erased me. For 6 years, I wasn't a partner, I was an acquisition. A piece of furniture in that glass cube. He monitored my calls, tracked my car, approved my clothes. Tonight was the first time in years I made a choice that was mine. And I chose you." She reached out, her cold fingers interlacing with mine, holding on as if I were the only real thing left in her world. It was a confession of absolute loneliness, revealing that her aggressive confidence was just a shell built to survive a domestic prison. But the moment of connection was shattered by a soft, digital chime from the Porsche's dashboard. The navigation screen, which had been dark, suddenly illuminated with a crisp, bright map. A red dot began to pulse at our location. "What did you touch?" Elena asked, her voice spiking with panic. "Nothing," I said, backing away. "I didn't touch anything." Then, the car's internal speakers crackled to life. "Vehicle location confirmed," a synthesized voice announced. "Remote ignition disabled. Security team dispatched." We froze. Vance hadn't let her go because he was arrogant. He had let her go because he knew she would lead him to the missing drive. He had played us. The Porsche wasn't an escape vehicle. It was a tracking device. "He knows," Elena gasped, scrambling out of the car, dragging me with her. He knows we're together. We looked down the winding access road leading up to the observatory. Far below, a convoy of 3 black SUVs was snake-winding its way up the mountain, their high beams cutting through the dark. They were blocking the only exit. We were trapped at the summit. The external danger had transitioned from a possibility to an inevitable collision. We were cornered, with a cliff on one side and a private army on the other. "We can't outrun them," I said, the reality of our situation settling in like a stone. "And we can't fight them." Elena looked around wildly, then her eyes locked onto mine, fierce and terrified. She grabbed the lapels of my shirt, pulling me close. "We have to split up," she said, her voice trembling but decisive. "They want the drive, but they'll focus on me. I'm the target. I'll lead them into the observatory building. I'll trigger the alarms, make a scene. It will buy you time to slip into the hiking trails on the north slope. I'm not leaving you again," I protested, but she silenced me with a desperate shake of her head. "You have to. If they get the drive, this was all for nothing. We need to finish this." She pressed a heavy, brass key into my hand, not a car key, but an old-fashioned skeleton key. "There's a safety deposit box at the Union Station, box 404. It has the decryption key for the files. Without it, the drive is useless junk. I was going to go there, but I can't now." She looked over my shoulder at the approaching lights, now less than a mile away. "Take the drive. Get to the station. I will find a way out of this, and I will meet you there at dawn. We finish this together, or not at all." It was a suicide mission for her, a distraction to let me escape with the evidence. She kissed me hard, a desperate, terrified seal on our pact, and then shoved me toward the darkness of the hiking trails. "Go!" she screamed, just as the first SUV screeched into the parking lot. I scrambled into the brush, heart hammering, watching as she turned to face the headlights alone, buying me my life with her freedom. The descent from the Griffith Observatory was a frantic, tumbling nightmare through brush and mud, sliding down steep embankments in the pitch black until I hit the street level of Los Feliz. I didn't stop to breathe. I hailed the first taxi I saw, my clothes torn and my face scratched, looking like a man who had just crawled out of a grave. I paid the driver in wet cash to take me to Union Station, praying that the lack of a phone meant I was finally a ghost in the system. Union Station at 4:30 a.m. was a cavernous, echoing cathedral of Art Deco grandeur and urban exhaustion. The high ceilings and marble floors felt indifferent to my panic as I navigated the empty concourse, the sound of my own footsteps amplified in the silence. I found the bank of lockers in the old waiting wing, clutching the heavy brass skeleton key Elena had given me. Box 404. My hand shook so badly I dropped the key twice before finally jamming it into the lock. It turned with a heavy, satisfying thud. Inside, there was no money, no passport, just a single sealed envelope and a burner phone. I tore open the envelope. It contained a sequence of alphanumeric codes, the decryption key, and a handwritten note, "Upload immediately. Then disappear." I sat on a wooden bench facing the arrival board, the burner phone in my hand, terrified to look up. Every passing security guard, every janitor pushing a mop, looked like one of Vance's men. 5 a.m. came and went. Then 5:30. The commuter rush was beginning to bleed into the station, a river of strangers that offered cover, but also paranoia. I had just resolved to upload the data alone when a woman in a gray hoodie and oversized sunglasses sat down on the bench directly behind mine, back to back. I stiffened. "Don't turn around," Elena's voice whispered, rough and exhausted, right against the back of my head. "Vance's team is sweeping the perimeter. I have a tail, but I think I lost him in the subway tunnels." She was alive. The relief was a physical weight leaving my chest, but the tension was tighter than ever. We were 2 fugitives sitting inches apart in a public terminal, holding the bomb that could destroy a titan. "I have the code," I whispered to the air in front of me. "I'm ready to send it." I navigated to the secure server address listed in the files on the USB drive, which I had plugged into the burner phone via an adapter. "Do it," she commanded, her voice trembling slightly. "Burn him down, Alex." I entered the decryption key. The progress bar appeared on the cracked screen, decrypting. Uploading to Federal Securities and Exchange Secure Drop. It took 30 agonizing seconds. We sat frozen, back to back, feeling the warmth of each other's bodies through our clothes, united by the invisible digital stream that was currently dismantling Vance's empire. When the screen finally flashed upload complete, I heard Elena let out a long, shuddering breath. "It's done," she whispered. "The moment that file hits their servers, his accounts freeze. He's finished. He's not a threat anymore. He's a defendant." But the victory was short-lived. The reality of our situation crashed down on us. We had destroyed the external threat, but we had become liabilities to each other. Elena stood up slowly and walked around the bench to face me. She looked wrecked. Her lip was cut, her cheek bruised, and she moved with a limp, but her eyes were clear. She reached out, her hand hovering over my hand on the bench, but she didn't touch me. "We can't walk out of here together," she said, her voice devoid of the manipulative charm she had used in the closet. This was the truth. "Vance is done, but his associates aren't. If they see us together, they'll know who pulled the trigger. You need to be just a photographer again. I need to be a ghost." The choice was laid out in the cold morning light of the station. We had forged a bond in the dark that felt stronger than anything I had known, a connection built on survival and shared secrets, but to keep it, we had to sever it. "So this is it?" I asked, looking at the woman who had dragged me into hell and back. "We just walk away." Elena looked at me, a flicker of pain crossing her face, and then she leaned in, disregarding the risk for 1 second. She kissed me, not desperate or seductive, but a soft, final seal of gratitude. "We walk away so we can live," she whispered against my lips. "Go back to your life, Alex. Forget the glass cube. Forget me." She pulled back, adjusted her sunglasses, and turned toward the Amtrak platforms. She didn't look back. She dissolved into the growing crowd of commuters, a gray silhouette disappearing into the noise of the city, leaving me alone on the bench with a burner phone and a heavy heart. 1 month later. The news cycle had been dominated by the spectacular collapse of Vance Global. Indictments, asset seizures, a manhunt for associates. It was the corporate scandal of the decade. I watched it all from a small, dingy apartment in Silver Lake, having moved and changed my number the day after the station. I was working again, taking boring headshots for actors, trying to find the rhythm of a normal life, but the shadows still made me jump. I hadn't heard a whisper from Elena. I checked the news every day, dreading to see her name in an obituary or an arrest report, but she had vanished completely, as promised. The silence was the price of our survival, but it felt like a hollow ache in my chest. Then, on a Tuesday morning, a courier arrived at my studio. He handed me a heavy, padded envelope with no return address, just a stamp from a post office in Zurich. My pulse spiked. I took it into the darkroom, locking the door behind me, and tore it open under the red safety light. Inside was a thick stack of cash, enough to replace my car and then some, and a small, velvet jewelry box. I opened the box. Resting on the satin cushion wasn't a ring or a gem, but a brand new, high-security steel key with a neon tag. Underneath the key was a heavy cardstock note, typed on a vintage typewriter. It didn't have a signature, and it didn't say, "Thank you," or, "I love you." It had only one sentence, a callback to the moment in the closet where my life had changed forever, turning our terrifying memory into a promise of a new beginning. I picked up the key, feeling its cold weight in my hand, and read the line again, a smile finally breaking through the months of fear. "Test the lock on the penthouse door. I hear the soundproofing is excellent."